Hello. Good evening. Hi, Koren. How are you? You're on mute. I can't hear you for some reason.
Hi, Serene. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good to see you again. And
Same.
nice also to be with our friends.
Yes. What a pleasure to have you this evening and talk about a very important topic that is
Mhm.
timeless, even, right?
Absolutely.
So I'll start off by introducing myself and then introduce you. For those that do not know me, my name is Cerene Prince. I am a holistic psychotherapist. I am licensed in several US states. I was born in the US. I'm the first generation US born of four siblings out of four children. So I'm the youngest. Woohoo. And
Baby.
all my siblings were born in Antigua and Barbuda, as well as my parents. But many summers spent there. I had a strong connection, I would say, to my roots and visited often, even after my parents stopped paying for my ticket. So, so back to who I am and what I do. I own Orchard Blue Counseling Services, which is a private mental health company in New York. And I also own Counseling Consulting with Cerene, which is a registered counseling and consulting business in Antigua and Barbuda. And so I am presently in New York as I go back and forth to and from New York and Antigua. And so I am making use of the digital world with building connections and staying
Mhm.
connected with my sistren and brethren in mental health, right? And so that brings me to our special guest, Miss Koren Norton. And I'll just briefly describe as much as I can about
Ah.
Miss Norton because I don't know if we
Mhm.
have enough time. Right.
That's
So
funny.
Koren Norton is a workplace and social service consultant, a counselor, an international author, a columnist. Recently launched her app, Ask Koren. She's also an alumni of Hunter College School of Social Work,
Yes.
CUNY. Woo woo!
I know.
I used to I went to Hunter maybe for, like, 1 semester. But let me continue to talk about you, right? So you have over 15 years experience. Quorum provides Employee Assistance Program, or EAP, as many of us know it as, services. Quorum is an expert research and consulting, confidential and compassionate counseling services is what she delivers. Offers training and retirement planning. So I'm going to give it to you so you can further share with folks anything that I may have missed. You are well-rounded professional. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on with you, Serene. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to collaborate with someone as wonderful as you are. You've done so much for our parents and for our children in Antigua and Barbuda. So I'm actually very happy to be doing this topic with you. I think we have a little bit of a swap. You were born in New York and you come to Antigua. I wasn't born in Antigua. I was born in Guyana. I lived there from 16, but I came to your city for school, for grad school. So we have a blend of New York and Antigua and Barbuda. So it's great that we understand the two cultures because as we speak about this topic, sexual harassment in the workplace, I mean, it's two different geographical locations and a lot of the laws are different, but the bottom line is people are people, and so it's great that we're discussing this. Like you, I have a passion for people, a passion for helping people, and for our country. So we have to really do as much as we can to educate, create awareness, especially now as it's Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'm really happy to be with you this afternoon and with all our listeners. I think you're muted.
I mean, when am I ever going to learn to get off of mute? But right. So I was saying that this is my first live. I said to people, I'm on a live marathon to bring, um, awareness to mental health, but from a holistic approach, right? And so I wanted to talk about sexual harassment because, and I guess you can confirm whether or not, and I know that we live, basically in two different countries. So policies
Mhm.
surrounding sexual harassment may look very much differently than, between Antigua and Barbuda and New York, or the United States rather. But
Mhm.
as we come out of the pandemic, I think maybe persons have forgotten about sexual harassment. Yeah. And so, as a business owner in New York, my staff is required to take sexual harassment training before they
Right.
start, or within 30 days. That
Mhm.
is a requirement
Mhm.
for me to sustain a business and not get shut down, among other
Yes.
mandatory trainings. And then they have to do a refresher every 1 or 2 years, but that's policy driven by my company. And
Mhm.
so I don't know if there's anything that you want to share with regards to policies before we go into the definition of sexual harassment.
Absolutely. I do believe that every single workplace should have a sexual harassment policy, because it's very hard to regulate behavior, issue consequences, have compliance if you have not told persons what the gold standard is. So we need to have a gold standard for behavior in the workplace, what's acceptable, what is not acceptable. This way, when someone violates someone else, we'll be able to say, hey, you signed on to this when you joined this company. And so every company must have that mandatory, that policy whereby staff sign on to, and they say, listen, for me to work here, I know I have to do this. And that way there are no consequences. And the education has to be ongoing, the same way as you do in your workplace, Serene, in your company.
Mhm.
That has to be done. We want to have a no tolerance policy to sexual harassment.
Absolutely. And I know we'll get into this, but I'll just share to start, my company is fully virtual. And so the manner in which the way that sexual harassment is guided may look a little different, but is very much important. So we can kick it off by defining what sexual harassment is. And our viewers, we encourage you to ask questions, to offer feedback and comments, because we want this to be interactive, right? And so, Koren, if you can define for us what sexual harassment is.
Okay, definitely. Sexual harassment is unwelcome or unwanted sexual advances. It could be verbal, it could be touching, it could even be written, it could be suggestive, it could be photographs. It has to be unwanted and unwelcome. And even if you're doing something and you think it's a joke or it's okay where I came from, if the other person is saying to you, Koren, I'm uncomfortable with the photographs you've shown me. I'm uncomfortable with the emails. I'm uncomfortable with you touching my shoulder. It could be okay in your culture. But if the person is saying to you, I'm uncomfortable with this touch, it makes me feel I don't like it, then you have a right to cease and desist. So once those sexual favors and you're asking for sexual favors or the unwanted touching, emails, that sort of thing, it becomes sexual harassment. And then another aspect of the sexual harassment is the quid pro quo, where you're in a position of authority in the company, and for somebody to get a promotion or to get a raise or to get a bonus or to get special shifts or something, they have to subject themselves to your advances. And that is really, really wrong.
Yeah. Appreciate you sharing that. And so, I had someone reach out to me and say, because when you think of sexual harassment, I think automatically many persons think of a gender, female gender, right?
Mhm.
But I'm sure we'll get to this, that it is across genders, um,
Yes.
right? Across gender identities, LGBTQ plus, and we're speaking to everyone this
Yes.
evening. But we do know that there still seems to be based on at least the numbers that I've read recently, a specific high number in women who are sexually harassed, and particularly Black women and women of color. Would you say that's correct?
Yes, yes. The statistics are very much heavier as it relates to women being subjected to it. And it's also important to know that while it can happen across genders, it can also happen in the virtual space. So while a lot of us might look at sexual harassment as somebody groping us or brushing against us when they pass us at work, some of us have even experienced these things but didn't say anything because we felt like maybe it's just me, I'm just sensitive. It can also happen in the virtual space.
Yeah. There have been incidents, not that I've experienced, but I've heard of incidents where during the pandemic, yes, we know that there was mindfulness, but there were people that were coming on half dressed, coming out of their shower, knowing that they were having, a one-to-one meeting. And that is sexual harassment, right? And so that's one of the many signs when you talk about digital, like you shared, someone that may be sending a meme. People are in Zoom meetings. There are like 50 people in a Zoom meeting, and then you can send personal messages to someone on
Yes,
the side,
yes.
like, "Oh, you look nice," or, "Oh, some people were a lot of people were in their bedroom doing meetings, and even now, and so, like sending a message like, "Oh, that bed looks comfy. I wonder how that feels," and,
Yes.
different things like that. And your gut tells you, this doesn't feel
Yeah. Red flag.
yeah.
Definitely a red flag.
Yeah. And there are subtle ones. Um, and then another reason why I wanted to have this, because I know a lot of, young adults and people are going out into the workforce, and they have no idea what sexual harassment is in the workplace. And I know that when I was young, I had my first job maybe at 17, and I was working customer service somewhere. And I remember the I think it was the chief executive officer. I don't remember. He was showing me something, and he leaned over, right? Because this is what I define, and you can correct me, as subtle. And he leaned over, but he was in my private space. And I'm at the computer, and he leans over my shoulder, and he hovers over there. Didn't need to do that. And he's
Yeah.
talking slowly. And I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. And I was young, and I'm like, well, okay, that was uncomfortable. You know,
Yes.
I don't know if you have any other examples of like subtle ways in which there could be sexual harassment.
Yes. You see, the thing is too. Sometimes it's subtle, like that leaning over and the touch that appears to be as if it's innocent. So somebody's giving you a ride and they're leaning across to open your door or something, and their arm is touching, leaning on your chest, or they're moving in a small space and they know it's a small space, but they come at the same time as you. And sometimes a lot of young people come into the workforce, and some of the questions that are asked of them are inappropriate about their relationships, their personal lives, and things like that, or what was done on the weekend. And the thing is, because some of these things are so normalized, and people will say, "Oh, it's a culture. What's wrong with you?" The person now starts to feel as if I am wrong. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's normal because you see the same male or the same person doing it to multiple persons and they're not saying anything. And even though it makes you extremely uncomfortable for this person at work to be telling you what they did on the weekend, asking you what you did, it feels so uncomfortable. But because you see everybody else being okay with it, you feel like, okay, I need to go with the flow, or I need to just join in and fit in. And so you're afraid of being the one. But yes, if it makes you uncomfortable, if it makes you uncomfortable, trust your instincts, trust your gut, and you know what you're the workplace for. And these things you know are not a part of your work. So even if it's subtle, even if it's overt, even if it's suggestive, you just we're going to talk about how to stop it early so that it does not progress and get worse. So as soon as it becomes uncomfortable, we want people to start setting boundaries. So that's why it's important that we talk about these signs so people can know what to look for.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I know that I was talking about remote work, and I had read two different articles. One indicated that the complaints of sexual harassment had decreased during the pandemic, uh, because they were alluding to that, being that it was that people weren't in the office, and so
Mhm.
that it was, digital and remote work, that there was a decrease. And then there was another article that I read. One was dated 2021, another one was dated
Okay.
2023. And I'm sorry, I don't want to switch the screens because I don't want to get lost on here. But it indicated that there was an increase in sexual harassment, but digitally, because persons, there was a fine line, right? When I talk about persons showing
Yes.
up half dressed, getting up and they don't have any bottoms on, laying across their bed, making lewd comments. And there was an uptick. Other persons had reported that there was more sexual harassment. And, I imagine when I think about, and you can chime in, that any company that has policies surrounding sexual harassment, it predated the pandemic and working remote,
Yes.
if that wasn't happening before. So there weren't clear policies, right, for people
Mhm.
to follow. One would say, well, isn't it common sense? Well, not so much.
Well, the thing about the common sense approach is that it's not very common. And so when you leave it up to the discretion of people, everybody could have a different interpretation of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And that's why we need a standardized measure. And so along with what you're saying, there's some things that people absolutely know are wrong: the touching, the fondling, the words, the questions, those are different. And then that virtual space, the photographs and the images that were sent. I've had a client who had somebody send a porn clip to her and then said, oops, it was a mistake. And then what she spoke with another coworker and realized it was also sent to that person. So what this person was doing was sending it, feeling them out, and if they giggled and said, "Oh my gosh, that's nice" or something, then it's okay. But when my client said, "Why are you sending this?" and appeared to be upset by it, then the person kind of said, "Oh my, it was a mistake. It wasn't meant for you." Although, when speaking with another coworker, she realized it's something he did to other persons also,
Mhm.
right? And so we have to be mindful of that. And yes, those policies were written pre-pandemic. Nobody knew COVID-19 would come, and so a lot of the policies that we have, and even when we look at ILO conventions, it didn't necessarily cover remote work. And so companies now have to scramble
Yes.
to adapt their policies to include the virtual space, the Zoom, the laptops, the WhatsApp conversations, and all
Mhm.
these kinds of things. And then, Serene, guess what? It gets more complicated when something is done, especially like using the telephone, and you almost have no evidence. So if there is a letter, if there is an email, you can share it with HR or something. But when it's a phone call, you have absolutely no evidence when you want to bring it to HR to say, this is what happens to me. So it's almost like your word against the other person's word. And then if you're not in a position of power, some companies seem to think, okay, if it's your word against the other person's word, who's the one that's most valuable to the company? Who's the one that's harder to replace? And you, as the person who would have been to use a different word, a victim of sexual harassment, you might be the one that's easier for them to replace because of your status. And it's really, really very sad when people in a position of power
Mm,
take advantage. And one last thing about the pandemic is that it made a lot of people's job very like fragile. You want to keep your job because so many persons were losing jobs. And so now we have a vulnerable person, even say a mother of four, who's taking care of her children. Her income has been reduced significantly. And now she has to make a decision. Do I just stay at work and accept this so I can take care of my four children? Or do I speak up and potentially lose a job and have nowhere to live or nowhere to feed my children? Nobody should be put in that position.
mhm. Yeah, I'm glad you made that point because being vulnerable, and that's a whole nother live about mothers re-entering into the workforce uh, post-pandemic. It looks different. I don't know. Also, a lot of employees or employers, sorry, their policies predate that as well. But maybe we need to
Mhm.
do another live for that one.
Yeah, that's a whole different situation because we've lost a lot of social skills. We had 2 years where people were just doing things differently, and now we're throwing them back into the bundle. We didn't necessarily have talks or orientations. We just were supposed to go back to how things were before, and the world is not the way it was before.
And it's
So we
not
need
going
we need to be reoriented into the world of work and working with people, you know. Things
back.
have changed drastically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Let's get into the implications for not getting support while or after someone has been sexually harassed. Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, you go ahead.
No, I was just, sharing that when we say implications, it there's a spectrum, if you will, and not to invalidate anyone's experience. But like I shared that I had an experience, but I wasn't impacted by it, and not in that sense, because then I had began to develop boundaries, and I think I actually vocalized to this person that I need them to take 3 steps back. But that was my personality,
That
right?
takes a lot of courage to do, though. Most people might not be able to do that.
Yeah, but as my niece calls me auntie therapist, auntie Sue, auntie therapist. I'm from Southeast Queens, so
Okay.
a little rough. So not rough, but I can stand up for myself when needed. Yeah. But let's talk about the psychological implications. One are unexplained physiological issues like chronic headaches, stomach
Yes.
issues, yeah, elevated blood pressure, yeah,
Yes. Especially on Monday mornings when the person has to go to work. The
yeah.
migraines suddenly come on Monday because the thought of having to go to that space where you feel so violated is unbearable.
Hmm. Yeah, and the other ones are, the issues with the stomachs, the squeezing, and
Yes, and
not just
that's
descriptive, but there are physiological, the somatics that can happen.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And there also, when you think about the anxiety, anxiety manifests itself in all these symptoms that you described, Serene. I mean, we know how the body reacts. If you're walking down a street and you see a dog ahead, but you don't have anywhere to pass, you start to feel that flight response. Do I stand up frozen? Do I run? What do I do? You feel a sense of anxiety because there's an impending danger. It's the same thing when you have somebody going to a place where they don't feel safe, they feel violated, their boundaries are being pushed, and then they have to get up and go to that place and function normally and be productive. You your body reacts in a way, even if you're not saying it verbally, the headaches, the butterflies in the stomach, the sweating, or every time you have to go into that person's office. Sometimes people almost feel sick to their stomach having to go and face that person, especially again, we talked about a person who is in a position of power. The higher up that the perpetrator is in the organization, the more difficult it is. And so you have those symptoms that you explain, and some of them are related to anxiety. You have the depression, because I need this job to take care of my family, and so I have to bear it. So I'm getting up and going to a place every day where I'm being almost abused, right? I know people don't like to use a strong language, but if you were to sit and listen to persons who have gone through this would not be considered strong language, because you're taking away somebody's right to safety, somebody's right to be able to have control over their own body, what they see and hear, and you're in their space, you're in their you're affecting their safety, and they feel violated and often abused. And so there's depression, there's anxiety, there is limited or reduced productivity because you can't focus at work. You just can't focus at work. And then you feel devalued as an employee, because if I've made 2 or 3 reports to HR and nothing is happening, then what am I? Just a robot? I'm here just to do your job and you don't care about me as a person? And then in some scenarios, which are not as much, but some people get post-traumatic stress disorder. So when you've been exposed to this over a long period of time, you start to feel like post-traumatic stress disorder, which is when these things come back to you. So you may be outside of work and somebody approaches you who looks like the person at work who does it, and you start to feel the same feelings as you do towards that coworker who does that stuff, or that boss or that supervisor. You're at home, you're falling asleep, you're having nightmares, you feel like you can't eat, your appetite, everything is affected. And so we can't minimize the impact of sexual harassment in the workplace just to make people feel good. It is dangerous. It affects people. It's a form sometimes of mental bullying when somebody has to put up with it, and it creates a very toxic and unsafe workplace. And we really have to do something about it.
Yeah. And so one can also, would you say, use these descriptions of the implications, the psychological implications of sexual harassment to also be a sign that something is wrong. So even if someone doesn't doesn't have the words or they're not sure, their body, right, is telling them that
Yes.
they are being impacted, that there's something going on in their environment.
Well, that's an interesting point, Serene, because now I'm thinking that we need to now train our HR officers and managers to identify the signs, because there are some vulnerable persons in the workplace who are not going to speak up. And for example, if you have a male employee who every time he's called into his female boss's office, she's wearing something extremely short, her button is undone or something, or she's always having him work overtime and he feels uncomfortable. But because he's a male, he feels like if I speak out, people are going to say something is wrong with me.
Mhm.
And you notice he's uncomfortable. An HR manager or HR officer or specialist should be trained so that when you're bringing that employee in for appraisal, or there's a change in behavior or increased sick leaves, when you're doing that assessment, what's going on with you? Is the work too much? Do you have a sick relative? Are one of the questions or two of the questions they can slip in there is, are you feeling unsafe at work? And something as simple as that can open up the floodgates, because the person might not be sure. So while on the one hand, educating employees is important, having it in the employee handbook is important, HR persons should always be trained to look for signs and to ask certain types of questions to be able to elicit the correct information so that they can help to keep the workplace safe.
Absolutely. I like that. Do you feel unsafe? Right? That can open up a whole heap of things. And most importantly, the person can hopefully get the help that they need, right? Which takes
Mhm.
us into what are the benefits of EAP counseling for sexual harassment. And you, as the EAP consultant specialist, right? Share with
Mhm.
us, right? I guess persons may not know what EAP is.
Okay, I understand. So EAP is Employee Assistance Program, and this is a service that's provided to companies to help them with employees. It helps the managers of the companies, the supervisors to understand how to motivate, how to groom, how to coach, how to bring out the best in their employees. It helps employees to bloom in their work environment. So the EAP would provide counseling, substance abuse counseling, anger management counseling, training, and also leadership programs. So there's a whole host of services that the EAP provides to the company, and it helps everybody. What's the word for everybody? Toot moon bagay. You don't know that one, right?
I
I have
do.
to teach you some facts. You know that one? I
Yes, I
thought I would catch you.
do.
So the EAP is supposed to help everyone in the company to bagay. So it's not just supposed to be for management or for line staff, but at every level of employees in the company, they can benefit from the EAP. And so the EAP starts off, Cerene, with helping the company to create a proper policy because the HR person can't be experts in every single thing. And so somebody like you or me who studied this and who understands it can review their policy and say, look, you need to tweak this. It's not inclusive enough. It doesn't have consequences listed. You need to have a specific chain of how should go. The first step is this, the second step is this. These are the signs to look for. This is how the workplace environment should be. So we can first and foremost help them to create a solid policy based on legislation, based on the ILO conventions that the jurisdictions have signed on to. That's the main thing that will protect the company if they have to let go of somebody, if they have to discipline someone, but you can't do it unless you have a policy. And every single company in the US, in Antigua and Barbuda, everywhere, even if you have a company with 5 employees, you need to have a sexual harassment policy. It does not have to be long and complicated. What it is, what are the consequences of doing it, what you should do if it's done to you, and these types of things. And so it's important to have that. Now, when somebody is violated, the company, while they're doing their disciplinary measures, as you know, we start off with a verbal warning. You do the written warning, and then sometimes there's suspension or termination. If they have a labor union, that's a whole other thing. If there's no evidence of the sexual harassment, because sometimes it's difficult to prove, Cerene. Can you believe you're being violated and you have to prove to someone that you're being violated on top of having to go through that? It's not easy. And so the companies can bring us in to do investigation, and they can refer the person to you, me, or any other psychotherapist for help and guidance and support. Number one, that employee feels heard, that employee feels listened to, that employee feels validated, that employee feels, okay, this company sees me. You know how important it is to be seen?
Yeah.
One of the worst things that can happen to a human being is to feel invisible or to feel used only for what you can do. And so the person feels seen, validated, listened to. The counseling sessions are confidential. And so the person can describe in more detail what happened. And the counselor would help that person to rebuild their self-esteem, to be able to share their story in a safe place, to offset that effect of trauma that can happen if it's left unattended. It can build a person's self-confidence, help them to set boundaries. We don't want to get into victim shaming to say, okay, because she wore a short skirt, that's why it was okay to harass her. But we want to help that employee to set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's appropriate to say, could I have said something differently? We're going to help the employee to say, could I have done something to lead this person on? Obviously, that's not any excuse, but we want to ensure that people are not sending mixed messages, because then that can be used against them. And so we teach people how to communicate better, how to seek raises or bonuses based on merit and not on appearance or these types of things, or your gender, sex, whatever. And so it's important for us to help this employee to feel whole, to feel repaired, and to be able to go back into that space feeling confident, being able to set boundaries, and being able to be a productive employee of the company. So it becomes a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, because a lot of persons are not familiar with employee assistance program, or exploring it altogether, or knowing that it is still a confidential service. For those that are living in the United States, particularly in New York and New Jersey, so some of our companies have EAP. So there's two ways to obtain EAP. Your company may contract with a particular company or companies that have counselors, who are trained in supporting their staff with life stressors, inclusive of sexual harassment. Then the
Okay.
EAP can also be paid through your health insurance. So those of you that have commercial health insurance through your employer, you may have mental health service coverage or behavioral health coverage in addition to EAP. So what does that look like? You'll ask your employer, do we have EAP? They may say yes, you can access it through your health insurance. You contact your health insurance company and you ask for EAP. You have to get an authorization for EAP. And usually EAP, it ranges from, on average, is 6 to 12 sessions, and it's not for diagnostic assessments or psychosocial assessments. It's particularly for 45-minute sessions, 30-minute sessions, 45-minute sessions, couple and family sessions. And so you can utilize that, and I would encourage you, if you are experiencing sexual harassment, to exhaust your EAP. That is key in documentation, because it's specific to your work environment. If you do not have EAP, explore your health insurance plan to see if they cover behavioral health and mental health services. And we're going to go into, a few tips, but I just wanted to clarify that, because still in the US, in New York, people do not realize they have EAP services. And they are, a lot of more companies are starting to utilize that. I just wish they would raise the rate and what they reimburse us. That's another lie.
Yes, yes, I
Um,
understand.
right. So just wanted to offer that as well. And so, before we go into the wellness practices, I just wanted to make sure that we offer a disclaimer for Koren and myself that this live is for psychoeducational purposes only. This is not to treat you. This is not to tell you what you should go out and do. You definitely need to, if you're experiencing sexual harassment or any of these symptoms, please contact your doctor, see your general physician, make an appointment with the EAP, a mental health counselor, see your HR department, speak with your supervisor.
Absolutely.
They're the ones who are not, uh, you know, engaging in sexual harassment with you. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, we also want to remind the people, our listeners and others, that it's okay to say no. Even if the person is a senior management person in the company, even if it's a line coworker, if it's somebody who's your junior, it's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries. And a lot of times you're going to question yourself. You're going to wonder, did I imagine that? Am I being too specific? Am I being too picky? And then you might not want to say something initially, but be observant, be cautious, and just watch and see what happens. And if it feels uncomfortable to you, you say so. Someone might say, "Oh, I was just making a joke. I was just doing this because it's what they're accustomed to doing." But what makes it sexual harassment is if you say, "I am uncomfortable with this." So even if it's okay for other persons to do that, if it makes you feel uncomfortable because I'm a male, that's why this is being done to me because I'm a female, they think it's okay to touch or make advances, then please speak up about it and please say your words are making me uncomfortable, your text messages, your touching, it's making me uncomfortable. I'd rather you didn't do that. It takes a lot of courage, but it's absolutely worth it and it's within your right to set that sort of boundary.
We have a question from Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. We appreciate this question because, yes, Koren. So, Kathy asks, what if the employee makes the first move?
Okay, that happens. Sometimes we have some employees who feel that they can climb their way up the ladder by offering, things that are not necessarily work related. It happens. We're in a real world and we'll be practical. If that happens, again, the senior person needs to set boundaries. In some cases, based on the workplace policy, that person can be they can immediately receive a verbal warning. It's if it's an employee, then that management person needs to say, Miss Norton, I'm using my name, so it's not anybody else's name. Miss Norton, I noticed when you come to my office, the way you're sitting, it makes me uncomfortable. We try to keep a attitude of decorum here and professionalism. So I'd like to ask you when you come to my office to please be appropriately attired or please sit in a better manner that's not displaying anything inappropriate. And so it's setting boundaries, it's creating a safe workplace environment, and it's telling that employee what you're doing is not acceptable. We don't want that done here.
Yes. Kathy, did that answer your question? You can type in the chat box. Yeah, and we appreciate that because I'm sure may wanted to ask that as well. All right. So, wellness practices. Oh, Kathy said yes. Great. I like to say name it. You can name it in different ways, right? Oh, can you hear the lawnmower? Sorry about that. Can you hear the lawnmower? Why does he?
I heard it for a bit, but that's fine.
Give me 1 minute.
That's really fine. If we have anyone on the live who is an HR person, please ensure that I was just saying, Cerene, that if we have anyone on the line who's an HR person or a supervisor, please ensure that you update your policy to include the virtual spaces and persons working remotely. And just do that as quickly as possible to include these situations. It's also a way to cover yourself as a company.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was saying, one of the wellness practices is name it. Say what occurred and who did it. Even if it's months or years without any company or legal action, you have the right to name and acknowledge what happened to you. This can help free you from any sense of guilt, shame, confusion, or feeling powerless, right? So, naming it could involve sharing it with someone who you feel safe with, who will hold your information in confidentiality. That can be a close friend, that can be an EAP counselor, a mental health counselor. It can also involve, and I'm sure Koren will talk about it, journaling, right? That's something that you can also write in your journal and sort of free you from holding it in. Because when you're holding it in and when you're suppressing these experiences, they really can eat you up. Yeah,
Yeah.
Koren? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the naming it because sometimes we dance around issues and we talk around issues, and sometimes we're afraid to hit the nail on the head. And so it's important to say, this is what it is, this is how it made me feel. It's
Yeah.
important for you to be able to identify this is what happened to me. This is how it made me feel. This is how I feel now going to work. This is how it has affected my ability to get my work done effectively. This is how it has affected my trust of persons, because when something like this happens, sometimes your trust, you don't feel as trusting of other persons. That's a part of life. If something negative happens, it impacts how you perceive things going forward. And so the wellness practices Serene mentioned are absolutely great. I love journaling also, because journaling can act as a brain dump. When people have a lot on their mind, sometimes they have difficulty sleeping. Sometimes they have difficulty focusing. And what can happen is that that anger and that rage can be turned inward. And we have seen the effects of people who have been bullied at work and other places, and some of them have become suicidal, right? And gone into very deep depression. We don't want that to happen. So it's important to do your journaling, get it out of your head. It's important to seek psychosocial support, spiritual support. We have a large Christian population. Some people are into their spirituality. If that helps, meditation helps a lot. Meditation helps a lot, especially if you're having flashbacks, because with the flashback, sometimes when you least expect it, these thoughts just come back to your mind. Meditation helps you to release certain thoughts out of your mind. It helps you to quiet your mind. It helps you to be at peace. The talk therapy, exercise helps to release stress. Self care is a wellness practice that helps you to feel like, okay, you know what, I'm going to take care of myself to counteract the effects of the stress I have been feeling. It helps for people to let go of the shame and the guilt. Because what happens to some persons who have been sexually harassed is that when the person who perpetuated the activity on them is fired, for example, they feel a lot of guilt. Especially when you have other persons at the workplace viewing you differently. Who can make joke with she? I have to touch her with a long pole and these type of things. And because you stood up for your rights, you're ostracized sometimes at the workplace, because other people feel it's because of you that this person lost your job. And so you need to work around your feelings of shame, your feelings of guilt, your feelings of, and categorize the activity. This person lost his or her job because he or she did something against company policy, violated somebody else, and sexually harassed somebody for months, in spite of the fact that the person said it was not okay. So it's important that you do all that. Work around your guilt and shame, build your self confidence, rebuild your self esteem, and do the journaling, whatever it is that will help you to feel better as you recover from that sexual harassment, and not to blame yourself. Not to blame yourself.
We're after you go through this, I definitely want to touch back on culture and Kathy's question. Another wellness tip I like to suggest is attending to the areas in which you were violated, right? And so if that's in the region of the breast area, your back, your neck, whatever area that is, you want to attend to it. And so when you're doing the meditation practices, as Koren suggested, you want to hold on to it. You want to attend to it. You want to care for it. You want to help heal physically as well as mentally. And I truly believe in that. And so if you're engaging in spiritual practices, if you have prayers or scriptures, if you're Muslim, so if you're using the Quran, read what is important to you, or music, right? We have Lisa, our pastor Lisa, who is a beautiful gospel singer. I probably should have had you come on so you could do an outro for us. But you know, really touch the area, right? Because that's yours. You are taking back what has been violated. And when I use the word taking back,
Yes.
sometimes it can feel as though someone or something is still like presently there. But when you tend,
Yes.
right, you're like, this is my body. And I'm acknowledging and I'm saying that I was sexually harassed, I was sexually violated. but now I'm healing and I can start to move forward. Yeah.
Yes, Serene, that's a great idea for our guests because if someone has repeatedly violated you and a particular part of your body, sometimes you feel ashamed of that particular part of your body. If my breasts were not so big, then it wouldn't constantly be groped or touched or brushed against. And then you start to despise that part of your body because that's the part of your body that brings you the unwanted attention.
Mm,
And your body is your body. It's your beautiful self for you to love and take care of. And so, yes, that touching of your body, taking ownership of it, saying, this is mine, and you set boundaries mentally with that perpetrator. If it was constantly your shoulder being rubbed and stroked, after a while, you're like, every time somebody else touches you on that shoulder, you feel like really jumpy because you associate it with the sexual harasser. And that's not fair to you because your shoulder is yours and it's somebody that actually loves you and cares about you. It can be a place for a beautiful hug from your child or a sibling or something like that. So it's really important that we take ownership back of our body, take ownership of our mind, our mental space,
mm.
and I think that's a beautiful reminder that you give to us today.
Thank you. And wonderful wellness practice you offered as well. Kathy has another question for us. And we had briefly touched on this earlier in the live. And so Kathy's question is, sexual harassment in the workplace is from males only? Yeah. And so, Kathy, absolutely not. It's from all genders. Um, you can have same sex sexual harassment. So you can have individuals that are sexually harassing the same gender, right? Even though that person does not identify with their gender or their sexuality. You can have women who are sexually harassing men. And because, when we talk about culturally and power differential, um, culture oftentimes offers that a woman cannot come on or invade a man or sexually violate a man, which is far from the truth. And that can be weaponized against a man, would you say? Because the woman may say, well, he's going to be embarrassed if he
Yeah.
goes and reports that, look at me, that I sexually harassed him, right? And then starts to flip it and lie and say, no, he came on to me. And that happens a lot. What do you want to say to that, Koren?
Yes, I agree with you. Females do sexually harass males, and there's also same sex harassment. And also, if a woman identifies as a lesbian or something, sometimes you find men trying to harass them. I don't know if to prove a point or something, but it happens across genders. It happens across genders. The thing is, some men are embarrassed to report that my female boss is constantly touching me or asking me to come do something at her home or something like that because he might be afraid of how it would appear to other males. He doesn't want to be seen as a punk or something like that. And so, yes, a lot of men probably would not say something.
Mhm.
But yes, it happens to everyone. Different
Mhm.
ages, socioeconomic status, from lower level up, down. In most instances, the persons of power are the ones that perpetuate it, but it can happen differently.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Um, I also wanted to talk about um, the the perpetrators. And I'm going slow because I want to choose my words carefully so that I make sure that I'm compassionate, right? Um, So we talked a lot about the signs. What is sexual harassment? What are the signs? Um, but we didn't touch on, and I know this wasn't one of the questions, what causes someone to sexually harass someone, right? And so, not that we are, and not that I am being complicit of their behavior. But I think some people are just curious to know what would cause someone to violate someone sexually. Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
I've had de-identifying a client, um, supervised one of my staff who had a client who was admittedly the harasser and was aware of that, and saw the patterns in which they behaved in different workspaces, right? And when we're talking about mental health, I think it's so important to look at two sides to it, because when we're treating the person that was sexually harassed, I believe we should also treat the harasser, because we want it to stop, we want it to end, so that
Mhm.
now this person is no longer going out into the work field or workspace or even having their own business with the idea that what they're doing is right,
Mhm.
or that is supported. And so, you know, what I find a lot of times is that some of them have psychological disorders like narcissistic personality disorders, narcissism. Some of them have been sexually abused or even sexually harassed. There's a fine line between being the sexually harassed or the bully and the bullier, right? So
Mhm.
we see that as well. And I'm hoping that any persons who are watching or know someone who is the one that sexually harassed goes and seek help so they can stop that dangerous behavior, because sexual harassment can easily lead to sexual assault and rape.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Koren.
In addition to the personality or psychological disorders and all that, I think sometimes we see a cultural factor coming in certain jurisdictions. When you walk on the street, you know that if you know they have the common joke, if you're passing a construction site, you expect to be whistled at or have comments hurled at you. That's not in the workplace, it's on the street, but it's very common when women are walking, if they're passing a place where there's a group of guys, that they sometimes would take a longer route for 15 minutes just to avoid having to pass in front of them because things are going to be said. And if you don't respond favorably or you ignore or you think you all that and then they hurl at you. And so culturally, I think sometimes people think it's okay for people to make sexual jokes and that somebody's body, if you don't physically touch them, it's okay to make jokes and say things or show them pictures. So some people are of that view, but sexual harassment is not only physical touching. And so there are some cultural reasons for it. Some persons behave a certain way when others are around to gain status. Some people feel like they can get away with it. And because they've gotten away with it multiple times in the past, it becomes like learned behavior. It becomes sort of like a habit. And so they automatically think that it's okay. And so having this no tolerance policy from a workplace standpoint means a lot. Empowering our females, males, or other persons to say no, to set boundaries, to recognize the signs, that really makes a great difference. And if persons, like Cerene said, feel like they have a tendency to go overboard, to touch in an unwanted manner, right? Notice if it feels like a compulsion, then please try to seek help, because we would not want somebody to end up in prison for something that's avoidable. And so if you have had it done to you, you need to seek help. If you're the one that's doing it, you need to seek help. So help is available for everyone. And that's why we're talking about these important topics.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm wondering, does anyone else may have some comments or questions they would like to add to this? Um, Anything. I know some people came on a little late, so we do welcome still. We have a few more minutes if you want to share anything with us this evening. All right. So, Koren, share with the people, right? Where they can reach you, the services that you're presently offering, your books, your app. By the way, I'm on the app, so it's a community. I love it. It is fantastic.
I'm
Uh,
happy to hear that.
yeah, great literature, readings, and the ability to connect and communicate with other persons on
Yeah.
there. So yeah,
Well, we as practitioners, our least favorite topic is ourselves. We always tend to focus on others. But yes, so for those of you who want to seek help or get information, and you're on the Shire side right now, you can access like our website. So I have an app called Ask Koren, AskKoren, and it has videos in terms of relaxation, sleep, workplace wellness. We have weekly articles that come out on Fridays, sorry. And we have also articles in a number of topics that are suitable for parents. Serene is our parenting and youth expert, but there are a few for parents and for any situation that you can encounter. And there's a section where you can ask questions. So if you want us to address a particular topic, then let us know. My website is www.consultkoren.com, CONSULTKOREN.com. And on it, I do have some lovely books that a lot of us can benefit from. Serene talked about narcissism, and we do have a course coming up recovering from a narcissistic relationship. So just get in touch, and whatever your needs are, we will try to help you as best as we can as we seek to create a safe community in Antigua, Barbuda, and beyond. Because we
yeah,
know we're talking to persons from different locations, but we want to ensure that wherever we are, we contribute to safe spaces. And we love hearing from you because our purpose is to serve people. And if you tell us what your needs are, we can be sure to create tailor made programs for you. So we're happy to help.
yeah. Thank you for sharing. I've put in the comment section your link. So the first link is to your app, the second link is to your website, and the third link is to your Facebook page, where persons can connect with you. Um, Koren, thank you. And I'll just share with you all, for those living in the US and probably in Antigua and Barbuda, you can go to the same site, which is Orchard Blue Counseling Services. You can schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation if you're interested in counseling services in Antigua and Barbuda, supportive counseling. And in New York, if you're interested in psychotherapy services. I also host workshops, wellness workshops for parents in Antigua and Barbuda and in New York. I host workshops in schools. I love community work as I love it, love it, love it. Um, Also, if you want to email us, you can email us at info@orchardbluecounseling.com. And I put the website in here, where you can reach us. Also, I want to share that this is my first live as I'm bringing mental health awareness. And so I want you to join me next week, Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. For those of you that know, Ms. Botley, Juliet Botley, or Julia Mango, who is a comedian, but she's also a mental health advocate, as she vocally shares and publicly shares that she has survived 3 suicide attempts. She has a mental illness as well, and really has rose above and been really diligent with her mental health care, encompassing holistic care. And so she was wonderful in agreeing to come on with me, because every third Wednesday of the month, I co-host on Point on the Street with the host Vernon Springer of Point on the Streets. And it's been wonderful in really bringing to light about mental health services for many of you, and not so much mental health services, but mental health information, right? And just really looking at it from different perspectives, different angles, and just really from a holistic approach. There's no shame in being sexually harassed. There's no shame in having the symptoms of sexual harassment. So I appreciate you all for joining and tuning in. For those that you can watch later on, for those that couldn't join us, but definitely join me next week, Wednesday. That is the 17th of May at 8 a.m. New York, Antigua time. If you're in Jamaica, West Indies, that is 7 a.m. your time. And I have to say Jamaica, West Indies, because I live in Jamaica, Queens. So
Ah,
there may be persons who are in Southeast Queens and they're like, well, which Jamaica are you talking about? Jamaica, Jamaica, West Indies. Yes. So I hope you all join me next week, Wednesday. Koren, thank you again. You
my
were
pleasure.
wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Everyone, have a wonderful and blessed evening. Be well.
Take care. Bye bye.